So you obviously both spent a lot of time in the last sort of 7 weeks plus in the hospital. Question for both of you, what was the experience like in the last 7 weeks? You know, you were there every day, weren't you? Together, spending time with each other?
Well, I actually stayed overnight for the entirety of the 7 weeks. The 2 days I had to go home to take the car back from the car park that I'd parked for about a month. But it was precious, and I have to say kudos to the Royal London Hospital, the staff in the ward, and those in the higher up that made my stay comfortable there and did support me and my father to the very end. I mean, he died when he was 96 years of age, but the treatment that he got was stupendous. It was an emotional roller coaster, I have to say, Damana, that, you know, my father was at one stage, he looked very healthy, and we were discussing discharge, and then there was a turn, and then I didn't want to perhaps accept it, but they knew that he wasn't going to leave the hospital, and I refused to accept that. So to the very end, I was expecting to, in fact, take him home, and speech and language therapist, I was lining up as well as a physiotherapist. So when he actually went, when they woke me up and say that Almona, you know, the final breath that he took, I still wouldn't accept it.
Because, you know, you're a fighter till the end, you know.
Oh, he was.
And, you know, to get to the age of 96, I mean, that in itself is an achievement. So kudos to all of you to really holding on and being there for each other, because it's such a tough time being in a hospital. And even for yourself, I can see, as a grandson, you must have found it very difficult. But you must have had some good memories too.
Yeah, it is difficult because I suppose they're great staff and really, really wonderful hospital, really wonderful people. We met their other patients as well, really some wonderful characters. But it is difficult to come to terms with that humanness of all the mortality of it all. You know, someone I always remembered him being such a sort of big. He's a very big, healthy man. You know, he could, and he'd always pick me up, even when I wasn't a light kid. He'd always pick me up, and to see him in the bed, and obviously when you've been in bed and you haven't used your muscles at all, you'd be surprised how quickly the human body, I don't want to say this, withers away. You know, it's really difficult to watch it. So I think it was really hard in the psychological sense of coming to terms with such a big man who I'd always, even when being the height I am now, I still craned my neck. You know, having sort of seeing him in bed and almost childlike, infantile. You know, he was a fighter, but he had to accept the care. He wasn't necessarily willing to accept it first. He was very independent, but he had to accept this care. And life is circular. You know, you start off as a child, you become independent, and you get older and you become more dependent. You sort of go back to being a child again, and it's weird. It was very difficult.
It's the circle of life, isn't it?
That's the thing. You come to terms with it.
And I think everybody, you know, comes to terms with the circle of life in the, you know, Muslim community, whatever community you're in. And I think it's great that he's touched so many people. And obviously we've got some wonderful guests with us. We've got, you know, Councillor Choudhury here with us. You must have, you know, encountered him on many occasions throughout your community work and charity work, right?
Yes. You know what? Instead of me, there could have been hundreds and thousands of people sitting here talking about some of their interactions. But I'm blessed to sit here. What I think he reminds me of is he was such a unique character. He's obviously stature, he's such a tall man. And he used to always wear this really stylish waistcoats and a matching hat. And you would see him from afar. And he used to walk from Roman Road to Whitechapel, where my parents' house is. He used to walk it all that way on a regular basis to come and see my dad. And I wouldn't walk, you know, half that journey, but he would actually walk all that journey. And we would also sort of go there and we would sort of sit down, speak to him. And in terms of like a regular interaction, because of his love of poetry and my dad's love of poetry, there is an organisation that has been running for a good 30, 40 years, I think, a Renaissance Shaitu Majlis. And that organisation, they have regular sessions in the Woldham Community Centre in Whitechapel. And he used to come regularly to come and recite his poetry, and other poets would sit there and recite their poetry. And I was astounded sort of at, you know, things that he would remember when he was a child. Like his memory was incredible. And he would just go on and on and on, you know, reciting poems that no one in the room had probably heard. And then, once again, thinking about his memory, he would share certain stories about his time in St Albans, some of the community work he did there, some of the contribution he had to the liberation movement in Bangladesh. You know, although they were, you know, thousands of miles away, he played a really important role. He was part of the action committee in St Albans. so he would share some of those stories, and later on, when he came to sort of our area of Tower Hamlets, I think he got involved in a variety of different community work, and obviously he's more renowned for some of his COVID work. But before then, he was involved in so many community organisations, and I would regularly see him.
And in terms of, was there any particular memory that you had with him, or a particular interaction you had just yourself that you really sort of enjoyed?
I used to, when I used to come down, our living room is downstairs, so when we used to walk out, we always have guests in our house to come and see my dad for a number of reasons, and we'd look, and he'd always be there. And our sofa, it sort of sinks in. It's not the greatest of sofas, but because of how big he was, he would really stick out. And I know it may be such a funny memory to sort of share here, but I still remember him sitting in that corner sofa, and he was such a big man, but he felt like he was sinking in that sofa. And it's really that memory. But obviously, when we'd go into the room and speak to him, he'd talk about, you know, some of the stuff he'd done in St Albans, some of the community work he'd done here. He'd talk about, he'd recite his poetry. It's really those memories that really stick to me.
Wonderful. Now, we're definitely going to move on to you now. So, obviously, you had a really good relationship with him, you know, sharing your love of poetry.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
All right. I can start my part with reciting his poem in Bengali first, then I will translate it.
Of course, no problem.
There's two very famous poems he wrote. And then I'll tell you how did I introduce himself.
We keep it nice and short, if possible.
Yeah, it's not a very long year. One, his name is Taka, means money. Okay. This poem is taken from a book. Is published. It's Onubandha. His name is Onubandha. Okay. মানুষের কেনা বেচার সরকারি অনুমোদন মতে নাম তার টাকা ভিন্ন দেশে ভিন্ন কথা না বুঝিলে ফাঁকা টাকায় মান টাকায় সম্মান টাকায় জ্যুতি কবিতার শোনে প্রমাণ দেই টাকা থাকলেই সত্য পরিচিতি টাকায় সুখ টাকায় দুঃখ টাকায় ভালো মন্দ পৃথিবীর মানুষ কেন এত প্রফুল্ল পাইয়া টাকা ফুলের গন্ধ অন্যথায় পঙ্গু হয়ে থাকিলেও বিরাট গুণগান না থাকিলে টাকা হাতে হায়রে মানুষ টাকার জন্য হয় কেন তো পদে পদে এত অপমান আল্লাহর লীলা খেলা বুঝা ভীষণ ভার যে কোনো গণিজন হয়ে যায় ছোঁয়াচে টাকার টাকায় আকাশ টাকায় বাতাস টাকায় বিকাশ বাঁচা মরা হয় যদি না থাকে তার টাকার প্রকাশ বাংলাদেশ ভারতীয় মুদ্রায় টাকায় প্রচার আমেরিকার ডলার ব্রিটেনের পাউন্ড বিশ্বের বিচার যত সুন্দর যত সুখী হোক যত পরিবার টাকা বিনা ধ্বংস হয়ে যায় সোনার সংসার
Thank you so much.
I'm saying just the translation. Money, means of buying and selling that approved by the government, that's called money. Money is called in different names in different countries. Money give status, money give dignity and fortune. By poem, I bet that the money give you name and fame. Money are the means of your happiness, but sometimes your gifts to you. Sometimes I wonder that why people of the whole world are worship of money. Without money, you are inept, even if you are too wise. Without money, people being suffered with insolent. It's quite unfeasible to realize God's charisma when I see someone becomes exalted just for owning money. Everywhere I can see money's magnetism in the whole universe. I can hear the shout on a victory of money. You are in a real trouble if you don't have money. Without money, once a happy family could face a tragic end. This is the one, and
Wonderful.
Another one is.
Oh, we've only got time for those two, I'm afraid, but we will definitely come back later in the show.
Okay.
I want to say a huge thank you to all of you for, thank you so much for all your time and for all your contributions and memories. And I'm sure the memory will be living alive for many, many years to come. And, he's really made an impact to the community, the wider global world as well. So we should always remember that and pray for him to be reunited in paradise with all of us and to be forgiven for all of his sins. Thank you so much to you, Almona, Pushkin, Councillor Choudhury, Mozi Monibol Haq. We will now be going on to a break, and after the break we will be back in the kitchen to do a lovely dish with Pushkin and Almona. So do join us after the break.